There are mysteries in Missouri that defy conventional explanation. From the staggering complexity of Cahokia and its unexplained alignments to mysterious artifacts unearthed across the region, tonight we're exploring strange patterns in Missouri's past that simply cannot be ignored. Evidence that challenges everything we think we know about pre-Columbian America and might just rewrite our understanding of human civilization itself. Before we dive into it, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. They make it more dynamic, but you can follow along strictly through the audio. Feel free to let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. And if you'd like to support me in making these videos, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's begin our journey through the strangest mysteries of ancient Missouri. There are moments in history where a civilization simply vanishes, not with a bang, but with a whisper, leaving behind silent monuments and a mystery that echoes through the centuries. This is the story of Cahokia, the greatest city of ancient North America, and its puzzling connection to the land we now call Missouri. A story of a sudden collapse, a mysterious exodus, and a population boom in our own state that appeared, and then disappeared just as quickly. Imagine around 1,000 years ago, a city rose on the floodplains of the Mississippi River, across from what is now modern-day St. Louis. This was Cahokia. At its peak, it was a bustling metropolis, home to as many as 20,000 people. Its skyline was dominated by enormous earthen mounds, the largest of which, Monk's Mound, is still the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas. This was a place of powerful rulers, sophisticated artists, and skilled engineers. It was the heart of a vast trading network that stretched across the continent. And then, by the 1300s, it was utterly abandoned. The great city fell silent. The question that has haunted archaeologists for generations is simple. Why? What could cause such a powerful, complex society to simply walk away from everything they had built? Theories abound. There is evidence of a great flood that may have devastated their crops and their homes. Some point to signs of social unrest, perhaps a revolt against the ruling class. Others suggest that resources were overhunted, that the land was exhausted, leading to famine. Or perhaps it was a combination of all these factors, a perfect storm of disaster that made staying in Cahokia impossible. But if they left, where did they go? This is where the mystery takes a fascinating turn, and the spotlight shifts to Missouri. Around the same time that Cahokia began its decline, something remarkable happened to the southwest. The Missouri River Basin, particularly areas in central and eastern Missouri, experienced a sudden and significant population boom. Archaeological sites from this period show a clear influx of people. We see new settlements springing up, settlements that share unmistakable cultural links with Cahokia. The style of pottery changes, adopting the distinct forms and decorations found in the great city. The types of tools, the design of houses, even the way they organized their communities, it all points to one conclusion. A significant number of Cahokia's people didn't just scatter randomly. They migrated. They came to Missouri. It seems to make perfect sense. The Missouri River offered a natural highway leading away from the troubled Mississippi floodplains. The river valleys of Missouri provided fertile land for farming, dense forests for hunting, and plentiful resources. For a population on the move, it must have seemed like a promised land. For a time, it was. These new communities thrived, building their own smaller mounds and creating a vibrant, if smaller scale, version of the world they left behind. But then, the second act of this mystery unfolds. This new chapter of civilization in Missouri did not last. Within a few generations, perhaps a century or two, these very same settlements also show signs of decline and eventual abandonment. The vibrant culture that had migrated from Cahokia faded away. The population busted almost as dramatically as it had boomed. So what happened? Why did the solution, the fresh start, also fail? This is the deeper, more complex layer of the Cahokia Exodus mystery. It suggests that the problems that doomed the great city were not just local to that one location. They were systemic. Perhaps the climate change that brought floods to Cahokia also eventually brought droughts to Missouri, crippling agriculture. Maybe the social structure that held them together unraveled without the powerful central authority of Cahokia's rulers. It's possible that the movement of people itself led to conflict with existing tribes in the region, straining resources. The answer is likely a tangled web of all these things. The collapse of Cahokia wasn't a single event. It was a wave. A wave that rolled westward into Missouri, sustained itself for a brief moment, and then finally receded, leaving behind only scattered artifacts and a profound question. The mystery isn't just why they left Cahokia. It's why the promise of a new beginning in Missouri ultimately proved just as fragile. What does that tell us about the delicate balance of even the most advanced societies? High in the rugged Ozark hills of Missouri, hidden away from the well-traveled paths, lies a cave. Like countless others in the region, it is a quiet, damp place of rock and shadow. But this particular cave, known locally as the Old Spanish Cave, holds a secret etched into its walls. A secret that has sparked a fierce debate for over a century. Are these mysterious carvings a priceless record of pre-Columbian explorers, a message left behind long before Columbus sailed? Or are they an elaborate, clever, and successful hoax? The story begins in the late 1800s, when the carvings were first officially documented. The cave's walls are inscribed with a series of symbols, lines, and figures. Some appear to be Latin letters, worn and difficult to decipher. Others look like numbers, dates, and even crude drawings of ships and religious crosses. The most prominent and controversial inscription appears to read in Latin, "I, Francis, a priest of the Order of God, departed from the sea on the day of St. Mark in the year 1040. If that is true, and if it is genuine, it would rewrite history. It would mean that a European, a Catholic priest no less, was deep in the heart of the North American continent a full 452 years before Christopher Columbus arrived in the Bahamas. The implications are staggering. Who was this priest? How did he get here? From which sea did he depart? The Gulf of Mexico? The Atlantic? His journey would have been an epic, unimaginable feat of exploration for the 11th century. Proponents of the inscription's authenticity point to other faint, supposed evidence of pre-Columbian contact. They whisper of legends of Welsh princes, of Vikings traveling inland, of lost explorers whose stories were never written down. Could this cave be the proof they've been searching for? A solitary, brave priest leaving his mark on the world, a testament to a journey history forgot. But then we have to confront the other side of the coin. The case for a hoax is, admittedly, very strong. The 1800s were a golden age for archaeological hoaxes. The public was fascinated by mystery and the exotic, and newspapers were eager to publish sensational finds. In this very era, the famous Cardiff giant hoax fooled thousands. Could the old Spanish cave inscriptions be Missouri's version? Skeptics raise compelling points. The Latin used in the inscription is suspiciously modern, not the Latin of the 11th century. The style of the letters and numbers also looks more recent. Furthermore, the date itself, 1040, is almost too perfect. It's just old enough to be awe-inspiring, but not so old that it becomes unbelievable. The most damning evidence, however, might be the location itself. The cave is remarkably difficult to find and access. If a priest from the year 1040, alone and in unfamiliar territory, managed to find this specific cave, why would he go to the trouble of carving a message in such a hidden location? Wouldn't you want to leave your mark somewhere more visible, somewhere it could be found? It seems more like the behavior of someone who wanted to create a mystery, to bury a treasure of sorts for others to discover later, thus lending their creation an air of authenticity. So where does that leave us? With a classic historical puzzle. There has never been a definitive scientific study that has conclusively dated the carvings. Without that, the debate rages on. Is it the most incredible historical find in Missouri's history, a silent, stone page from a lost diary of exploration? Or is it a beautiful, clever forgery, a testament not to medieval explorers, but to the skill and creativity of a 19th century trickster looking for fame or simply a good joke. The cave offers no other answers. It just sits there in the Ozark silence, its walls holding onto the secret, leaving us to wonder which story we want to believe. Picture Missouri, not as we know it today, but at the end of the last ice age. The air is cooler, the landscape is a mix of dense forest and open grassland, and roaming these wilds are creatures that now seem like myths. Giant mammoths and mastodons, colossal beavers and saber-toothed cats. This was a world of giants, and for the earliest people to arrive here, it was a world of both immense opportunity and immense danger. Now, imagine discovering the site of an epic battle between these first Missourians and one of the largest animals on the continent. A site that proves they were here, that they hunted these titans. Then, imagine that this site, this incredibly valuable resource, was used only once and then abandoned forever. This is the core of the mystery at Mastodon State Park. In the early 1980s, archaeologists excavating a site in Imperial, Missouri, made a discovery that sent ripples through the scientific community. They found the bones of an American mastodon, a massive elephant-like creature. But this was not just a random collection of bones. Mixed in with the remains were distinct, fluted spear points, Clovis points, crafted by some of the earliest known people in the Americas. This was undeniable proof of a hunt. It was a snapshot frozen in time, a moment where humans successfully brought down a creature that stood over 9 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed more than 5 tons. The Kensington bone bed, as it became known, is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for Clovis hunting in North America. Site tells a dramatic story. It seems the hunters ambushed the great beast, perhaps driving it into a bog or surrounding it. They hurled their spears and their aim was true. The mastodon was killed and butchered on the spot, its meat, hide, and bones providing a windfall of resources for the band of hunters. This was a tremendous success, a victory that would have been celebrated and remembered, which is why what happened next is so puzzling. After this one-time event, the site was never used again. There is no evidence of a subsequent camp, no later hunting activity, no signs that anyone ever returned to this place. It was as if it was marked and then forgotten. Why would such a prime location, one that had already proven its worth, be completely abandoned? Theories attempt to pierce the veil of 12,000 years. The simplest explanation is that the herds moved on. Mastodons were not stationary, they followed food sources. Perhaps the climate shifted subtly, the vegetation changed, and the great animals frequented this particular valley. The hunters, being nomadic, would have simply followed their prey, leaving no reason to return to an empty spot. But there are darker, more intriguing possibilities. Perhaps the hunt was not the clean victory it appears. Maybe the mastodon wounded or killed a member of the hunting party. The site could have become associated with tragedy and death, a place of bad medicine or unhappy spirits. In a world viewed through a spiritual lens, such a place would be taboo, shunned for generations to avoid attracting further misfortune. The bounty of the hunt would have been forever overshadowed by the loss. Another theory points to the possibility of a larger catastrophe. The period when the Clovis people and mastodons coexisted was one of tremendous upheaval. The Ice Age was ending, climates were fluctuating wildly, and many of the great megafauna were sliding toward extinction. Some scientists believe a comet or asteroid impact triggered this change. It's possible that the hunt at Kensington was one of the last of its kind. That soon after, the mastodon populations in that region collapsed entirely. The people themselves may have been forced to adapt quickly, shifting to hunting smaller game and gathering, their old ways vanishing along with the giants. The site wasn't abandoned by choice, but by necessity, as the entire world around it changed. The mystery of Mastodon State Park isn't just about a single hunt. It's about the end of an era. Why was this successful hunting ground never revisited? The answer may lie in a story of ecological shift, of spiritual belief, or of a catastrophe so vast it wiped out an entire way of life for both hunter and hunted. long before European traders crossed the Appalachians, and centuries before established trade networks linked the continent, a mystery was taking shape in the lands of the Osage people. The Osage, historically one of the most powerful nations in the Midwest, have a deep and ancient connection to what is now Missouri. Their traditions speak of a time of great strength and sophistication, and material evidence found in their ancestral lands suggests something fascinating, a knowledge of and access to a resource that should have been impossible to find. That resource was copper, and it came from a source hundreds of miles away, the Great Lakes. In ancient burial mounds and ceremonial sites linked to the Osage and their ancestors, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts made from nearly pure copper. These are not just crude lumps of metal. They are carefully worked pieces, including decorative beads, bracelets, ear spools, and small tools. The craftsmanship is exceptional, involving heating and hammering the native copper into thin, precise sheets. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, a skill that was incredibly rare in North America at the time. But the real mystery is not the craftsmanship itself. It's the origin of the material. Chemical analysis has proven time and again that this copper comes from a very specific place, the Keweenaw Peninsula in modern-day Michigan, on the shores of Lake Superior. This creates a historical puzzle of the highest order. The Great Lakes are over 500 miles from traditional Osage territory. Between them lie hundreds of miles of dense forests, wide rivers, and the lands of many other tribes. This was long before the horse, before wheeled transport, in an era of foot travel and canoe. How did this copper, in such significant quantities, make its journey to Missouri? The established historical narrative tells us that large-scale, transcontinental trade routes developed much later. So how did the Osage acquire it centuries, perhaps even a millennium, before such routes are supposed to have existed? One theory proposes a vast, forgotten trade network, a kind of prehistoric copper road. In this scenario, the valuable metal would have been passed from hand to hand, tribe to tribe, in a long chain of exchange that stretched from the shores of Lake Superior down the Mississippi River system and into the Ozarks. Perhaps it was traded for Missouri's own valuable resources like pipestone, chert for tools, or even salt. This would mean the pre-Columbian world was far more interconnected than we ever believed, with goods and ideas moving across astonishing distances through a complex web of relationships. Another, more dramatic theory is that the Osage or their direct ancestors made the journey themselves. Could small, highly motivated parties of men have traveled the thousands of miles round trip to the Great Lakes? It seems an almost impossible feat, but not entirely out of the question if the copper held immense spiritual or status value. These expeditions would have been epic sagas of survival and navigation, their stories lost to time, but their physical evidence remaining in the beautiful objects they brought home. There is a third, and perhaps most intriguing, possibility. What if the copper came to Missouri not through trade or travel, but because the people who would become the Osage originally came from the Great Lakes region? Some tribal oral histories and linguistic studies suggest a possible ancient link between Siouan-speaking peoples like the Osage and the upper Midwest. Could a migration have brought both people and their precious cultural materials southward? The copper artifacts would then be heirlooms, physical remnants of an ancient homeland, their significance far greater than their material value. They would be a memory in metal. The Osage Copper Enigma challenges our understanding of ancient North American commerce and movement. Was it trade? Was it pilgrimage? Or was it a journey of a people? The answer is hidden somewhere in those silent, oxidized green artifacts, waiting to be deciphered. History is not just about what remains. It is also about what has been lost. The story of human progress is often a story of erasure, where the new world is built directly on the forgotten foundations of the old. And in the flat, fertile farmlands of Missouri's Boothiel, in Pemiscot County, lies one of the most tragic and silent of these erasures. This is the mystery of the vanishing mounds, an entire complex of ancient earthworks that was methodically dismantled and plowed under before anyone could properly document what was there or who built it. Before the land was cleared for vast cotton and soybean fields, the landscape of Pemiscot County looked very different. Early settler accounts and a handful of preliminary surveys tell a story of a land dotted with earthworks. There were not just one or two isolated mounds, but an extensive complex of them. Platform mounds that might have supported important buildings, conical mounds that likely served as burial sites, and perhaps even geometric enclosures that defined sacred or social spaces. This was not a random scattering. It was the signature of a sophisticated, settled society on the Mississippi floodplain, a community that altered its environment to fit its spiritual and cultural needs. These mounds were the libraries of a people without written language, and their contents held untold stories. But then came the wave of American settlement. To the new farmers, these mounds were simply obstacles. They were in the way of a clean, straight furrow. They were made of rich, soft soil, perfect for scattering across a field, and rumors began to spread. Rumors that these ancient mounds held treasure within them. This combination of practicality and greed sealed their fate. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, the looting began. Treasure hunters and farmers dug into the mounds with shovels, destroying layers of history in minutes. They were not looking for pottery shards or clues to a way of life. They were looking for gold, for jewels, for anything of immediate monetary value. And while they rarely found such treasure, they did find things. They reported uncovering human skeletons, often accompanied by artifacts like shell beads, pottery vessels, and stone tools. These finds were treated as curiosities, their context, their placement, their relation to each other, completely destroyed as they were pulled from the ground. The real mystery and the true tragedy is that we will never know what was there, because the looting was followed by the plow. Any mound that wasn't completely dug out was simply bulldozed and flattened, its soil spread across the surrounding fields. By the time professional archaeologists became aware of the site's potential, it was far too late. The complex was gone. There are no detailed maps, no photographs, no extensive collections of artifacts from controlled excavations. It was erased before it could ever be studied. So the questions hang heavily over those now flat fields. Who built these mounds? Were they part of the great Mississippian culture, contemporaries of Cahokia, building their own powerful chiefdom on the banks of the Mississippi? Or were they from an even older culture, a precursor society that also expressed its beliefs through earth and labor? What was the scale of their community? Was it a large town, a regional capital, or a smaller ceremonial center? The few artifacts that survived the looting, scattered now in private collections or museum drawers, tell us that a significant culture was here, but they are single words ripped from a novel. The plot, the characters, the meaning, all of it is lost. The Pemiscot Mound complex is a ghost in the historical record, a profound reminder that not all mysteries are about what we find. Some of the most haunting are about what we destroyed before we ever knew its value. Every so often, an artifact appears that seems to promise a key to the past, an object so unusual, so out of place, that it threatens to upend everything we think we know about history. But then, just as suddenly as it appears, it vanishes, and all we are left with is a story, a description, and a debate that can never be settled. This is the exact fate of one of Missouri's most intriguing puzzles, a mysterious stone covered in unreadable script, found near the town of Utica. A find that has drawn comparisons to the famous and famously controversial Kensington runestone of Minnesota. The story begins, as many of these stories do, in the late 19th century. Around 1884, a farmer was plowing his field near Utica in Livingston County when his plow struck something hard. Upon investigation, he unearthed a large sandstone slab, roughly 3 feet long and a foot wide. What made this stone remarkable was that its surface was covered in intricate, carefully carved inscriptions. The characters were not English. They didn't resemble any known Native American script either. They were a series of strange, looping geometric symbols, arranged in neat rows. It was clearly a deliberate inscription, a message from the past waiting to be read. The stone, which became known as the Utica Stone, was put on display in a local store, where it became a curiosity. People came from miles around to see the strange rock with the mysterious writing, but no one could decipher it. Some speculated it was the work of early Spanish explorers, perhaps a claim marker or a religious inscription. Others, swept up in the popular theories of the time, suggested it was proof of Vikings or even Phoenicians traveling through the American heartland centuries before Columbus. The stone was a local sensation, a physical piece of a mystery anyone could go and touch. And then it was gone. Sometime in the early 20th century, the Utica Stone disappeared from public view. The most common story is that it was eventually used as foundation stone for a local building, buried face down in the dirt, forever hiding its message. Other stories say it was lost in a fire or simply thrown away. Despite numerous searches, it has never been relocated. No photographs were ever taken of it. Our entire knowledge of the stone comes from newspaper descriptions and drawings made from memory years after the fact. This lack of physical evidence is what makes the mystery so potent and so frustrating. So what was it? Without the original object, we are left with only theories. The most likely explanation is that it was a hoax. The late 1800s were a peak time for such creations, designed to attract attention or prove a pet theory. The symbols could have been pure invention or a garbled copy of writing seen in a book. If so, it was a successful hoax that captivated a community before being discarded. But the other possibility, however slim, is what fuels the legend. Could it have been genuine? Was it a rare example of a written system from a pre-Columbian culture that has otherwise left no written record? Could it have been a message left by a very lost visitor from across the ocean, a record of a journey that history missed? Without the stone itself, we can never perform tests to determine the age of the carving. We can never have linguists analyze the script. The Utica Stone is the ultimate historical cliffhanger. It teases us with the possibility of an incredible story, a secret hidden just beneath the surface of a Missouri field. But by vanishing, it forever guards that secret, leaving us to wonder if we lost a worthless rock or a key to a past we never knew existed. In the heart of a bustling modern city, ancient secrets often lie buried just beneath the surface. Sometimes they aren't buried at all. They're hidden in plain sight in the very shape of the city itself. This is the story of the lost skyline of St. Louis, a skyline not of steel and glass, but of earth and clay. Before the Gateway Arch defined the city, a different set of monuments dominated the landscape, a group of enormous earthen mounds. And their arrangement has led to a captivating theory, that their builders designed them as a mirror to the heavens, creating a permanent celestial code on the banks of the Mississippi. In the early 19th century, St. Louis was often called Mound City for good reason. The downtown area was home to a complex of these ancient earthworks, with 5 particularly large mounds forming a distinct group. They had names like the Big Mound, the Forked Mound, and the Bloody Mound. These were not simple piles of dirt. They were expertly engineered structures, platforms for important buildings, and likely sacred sites. For decades, they were simply part of the city's landscape. But as St. Louis grew, they were seen as obstacles to progress. One by one, they were tragically demolished in the mid-1800s, their soil used for construction fill or simply carted away. They were erased, and with them, potentially, a vast amount of cultural and astronomical knowledge. But before they were completely gone, surveyors managed to map their precise locations. And it is these old maps that have given rise to one of Missouri's most intriguing archaeological mysteries. When researchers looked at the spatial relationship between the 5 main mounds, they noticed something curious. The mounds weren't arranged randomly. They formed a very specific asymmetrical pattern. This immediately suggested to some archaeologists and astronomers that their layout might be intentional, and that the most likely intention was to mirror a pattern of stars in the night sky, a practice known as astroarchaeology, which is seen in ancient sites across the world, from the pyramids of Giza to the mounds of Cahokia. The compelling question is, which stars? This is where the mystery truly begins. One prominent theory suggests the mounds align with the constellation Ursa Major, also known as the Great Bear, which contains the famous Big Dipper. The 5 key stars of the Dipper's cup and handle seem to correspond almost perfectly with the positions of the 5 St. Louis mounds. For a farming culture that depended on seasons, the rotation of the Big Dipper was a crucial calendar, marking the time to plant and to harvest. To immortalize this important clock on the earth would have been an act of both practical science and deep religion. However, other theorists have proposed different celestial patterns. Some see a correlation with the constellation Orion, the Hunter, a star group often associated with creation myths and deities in other ancient cultures. Others suggest the alignment might not be with a single constellation, but with a specific, significant arrangement of planets, a rare celestial event that occurred during the mound's construction. Without the builders' own records, which were lost when the mounds were destroyed, it is impossible to say for sure. The precise astronomical knowledge that guided the mound builders' architects is a code we can no longer crack. The destruction of the Big 5 mounds is a profound loss. It didn't just level some interesting hills. It may have destroyed a Rosetta Stone for understanding the cosmology of ancient North America. Were these mounds a sacred map, allowing priests to walk among the stars on Earth? Were they a temple complex designed to harness the power of the heavens? Or is the celestial alignment merely a coincidence, a pattern we see because we are desperately looking for one? We will likely never know for certain. The mounds are gone, and their secret is kept by the very stars they may have been built to honor. The Ozark Mountains are a place of deep quiet and hidden hollows. Their high limestone bluffs are dotted with natural shelters, cool in the summer and protected in the winter. For centuries, these bluffs were home to a unique and thriving culture, a people we now know only by the name given to them by archaeologists, the Bluff Dwellers. They left behind a vivid record of their daily lives in the dry, sheltered caves. And then, around 500 years ago, they vanished. Not a slow decline, but a complete and total disappearance. The question is, what could cause an entire culture to simply evaporate from their homeland without a trace? The Bluff Dwellers flourished in the Ozarks from around 3000 BC up until approximately 1300 AD. They were not mound builders. Their world was the rock shelter and the forest. Thanks to the exceptional preservation in these dry caves, we have an incredibly detailed picture of their lives. We know they were skilled hunters, taking deer, turkey, and small game with expertly crafted spears and bows. We know they were gatherers, consuming nuts, berries, and wild plants. Their material culture was rich and sophisticated. They crafted fine baskets, woven so tightly they could hold water. They made intricate sandals from plant fibers and tools from bone and stone. They lived in family groups in these shelters, their homes arranged around central hearths, the smoke-blackened ceilings of the caves still visible today. The record of their existence is so complete, so tangible, that it makes their disappearance all the more shocking. By the time the first European explorers entered the Ozarks, these bluffs were empty. The Bluff Dwellers were gone, and the native tribes who lived in the region, like the Osage, had no memory or tradition of who these people were or what had happened to them. It was as if they had never been there at all. So what catastrophic event could wipe out a resilient, established culture so completely? The most widely accepted theory points to a great drought. Tree ring data from the region indicates a period of severe and prolonged megadroughts in the 13th and 14th centuries. For a culture dependent on hunting and gathering, this would have been devastating. Springs would have dried up, game animals would have moved away in search of water, and nut-bearing trees would have failed. The very ecosystem that supported the Bluff Dweller way of life would have collapsed. Facing starvation and thirst, they would have been forced to abandon their ancestral homes. They may have migrated out of the Ozarks entirely, perhaps joining and being absorbed by other, larger farming cultures to the east or south, losing their distinct identity in the process. But there are other, more unsettling possibilities. Could a new disease have swept through the population? While old-world diseases like smallpox came later, epidemics were not unknown in the Americas. A mysterious illness could have decimated their small, scattered communities. Another theory suggests conflict. Were they displaced by a new, more powerful and aggressive people moving into their territory? Did a war of extermination wipe them out? The problem with this theory is a lack of evidence in the archaeological record. There are no mass graves, no signs of violent trauma on the few skeletal remains we have. The mystery of the Bluff Dwellers is a quiet one. There was no single dramatic event, no buried city. Their end was likely a slow, agonizing retreat from a changing world. They walked away from their shelters, leaving their baskets, their tools, their sandals behind as if they intended to return. But they never did. Their disappearance serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of human culture, even one so well adapted to its environment. It asks us to consider what happens when the world changes too quickly, and a way of life that lasted for thousands of years suddenly, and silently, comes to an end. Beneath the calm, reflective surface of many modern lakes, history lies submerged. When reservoirs are created, they often flood valleys that have been home to people for thousands of years, swallowing towns, roads, and sometimes whispers of something much older. In the depths of Missouri's Wappapello Lake in Wayne County, such a whisper has intrigued divers and researchers for decades. Down in the silent, murky world, there are strange stone formations. The question is, are they simply a quirky trick of nature, a collection of weathered sandstone? Or are we looking at the drowned ruins of an ancient site, a place that was already a mystery before the waters ever rose? Wappapello Lake was created in 1941 with the construction of a dam on the St. Francis River. The valley that was flooded had been inhabited for centuries, and the lake famously submerged the old town of Wappapello itself. But the story begins long before the 20th century. For years, local lore spoke of unusual rock formations in the area. When the lake is at its lowest levels, usually during periods of drought, some of these structures become partially exposed. And when intrepid divers explore them underwater, they describe something extraordinary. They report what appear to be linear arrangements of stone, right angles, and stacked rock formations that look suspiciously like walls, pathways, and even the outlines of potential foundations. The immediate and most scientific explanation is that these are entirely natural. The region is known for its sandstone, which can fracture in remarkably straight lines due to geological stress, creating a phenomenon called jointing. This can produce blocks that look deliberately cut. Weathering and erosion can further shape these rocks, and the powerful flow of the river over millennia could have tumbled them into piles that, to our pattern-seeking eyes, appear arranged. Skeptics argue that humans are predisposed to see order in chaos, to find faces in clouds and walls in random stone piles. They posit that the Wappapello structures are a fantastic example of a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, amplified by the distorting effects of water and low visibility. But the other possibility is what fuels the imagination and keeps divers returning to the site. What if they aren't natural? If they are man-made, their origin story splits into two fascinating paths. The first is that they are the remnants of a historical settlement, perhaps from the 19th century. Old root cellars, fieldstone foundations, and homestead walls would have been flooded when the lake was filled. Over decades underwater, these structures would crumble and be covered in silt, making them look ancient and mysterious when they are, in fact, relatively modern. The second and far more speculative path leads back into deep time. Could these structures be pre-Columbian? There are accounts of stone forts and walled villages in the oral histories of some Native American tribes in the southeast. While not common in Missouri, it's not impossible. Could a small, unknown group have built a unique stone settlement in this valley, a site that was abandoned and forgotten long before American settlers ever arrived. The flooding of the lake would have then preserved it in a watery time capsule, protecting it from looting and farming that destroyed so many other sites above ground. The frustrating beauty of the Wappapello mystery is its elusiveness. The lake levels dictate visibility, and a proper archaeological survey of the underwater site is difficult and expensive. Without definitive proof, like a clearly human-made tool embedded in the structure or a datable piece of mortar, the debate remains perfectly balanced. Are we looking at a geological marvel, the ghost of a pioneer homestead, or a rare and ancient stone complex? The lake holds its secret close, allowing us just glimpses, ensuring that the mystery of what lies beneath its waves remains wonderfully unsolved. Every so often, an artifact is unearthed that is so bizarre, so utterly out of place, that it seems to break history. It creates an instant schism between those who believe it must be a hoax and those who believe it is proof of a forgotten chapter of the human story. And few artifacts found in Missouri embody this schism more than a small, controversial object that, for a brief time, promised a connection between the ancient Nile and the ancient Mississippi. This is the story of the so-called Egyptian tablet, a discovery that ignited a firestorm of debate before vanishing almost as quickly as it appeared. The story takes us back to the late 19th century, the heyday of mound exploration and rampant looting. During the excavation of a Native American burial mound somewhere in Missouri, the exact location was never properly documented. A small, fired clay tablet was discovered. It was unassuming in size, but breathtaking in its content. On its surface were carved a series of intricate symbols. Most prominent was a clear, unmistakable pyramid. And surrounding this pyramid were what appeared to be hieroglyphs, characters that bore a striking resemblance to those found in ancient Egypt. The implications were, to put it mildly, explosive. If authentic, this little tablet could rewrite the history of global exploration. It suggested transoceanic contact thousands of years before Christopher Columbus. Theorists imagined Egyptian ships crossing the Atlantic, or perhaps a lost tribe of Israelites bringing their knowledge with them. It seemed to provide physical proof for all sorts of fringe historical ideas. The tablet was exhibited and discussed, creating a media sensation and captivating a public fascinated by the exotic and the mysterious. But almost immediately, the skepticism from the academic world was fierce and unanimous. Mainstream archaeologists presented a powerful case for it being an elaborate hoax. Their arguments were multi-layered. First, there was the problem of context. The mound it was supposedly found in was not properly recorded. The tablet appeared alone, with no other similar artifacts around it. In archaeology, context is everything, and this object had none. It was an anomaly in a field, with no supporting evidence. Second, and more damning, was the design itself. Egyptologists who examined drawings of the tablet pointed out that the hieroglyphs were nonsensical. They weren't a coherent message. They were a jumble of real and invented characters, much like someone who doesn't know a language might try to copy its alphabet. The pyramid also seemed off, more resembling a romanticized 19th century drawing than an actual Egyptian structure. The most likely explanation is that the tablet was a planted fake. The late 1800s were a golden age for archaeological hoaxes, like the Cardiff Giant. Creating a fired clay tablet with some clever carvings would have been simple. The hoaxer could have buried it in a mound being excavated, discovered it, and reaped the rewards of fame and notoriety. The sensational story would have been worth the effort. The mystery of the Missouri Egyptian tablet isn't really about whether it's real or fake. Most experts are convinced it's a forgery. The true mystery is its ultimate fate. Like so many controversial objects from that era, it has disappeared. There are no known photographs, only drawings. The physical object is lost, perhaps sitting in a dusty attic box, or maybe it was destroyed. Its disappearance means the debate can never be truly settled. It remains a ghost in the archaeological record, a cautionary tale about the desire to find connections where none may exist, and a permanent, if dubious, footnote in the annals of Missouri's unsolved ancient mysteries.